Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the Capital Projects Committee meeting. It was duly noticed and the minutes published, and so I'd like to call the meeting to order. I would like to welcome three new committee members tonight. I think our committee will benefit greatly from your expertise and your wisdom, so welcome to the committee. Um, and first of all, let me see. Let's talk about the agenda. I would like to add two items to the agenda tonight. The first item I'd like to add as at the last item, item N, will be a discussion of pickleball facilities. And the other item that I would just like to inform you about, it'll be at the very beginning when Ms. Locke gives her presentation, is a short overview along with the mayor of the GNRC. Since several of you are new, this may be good to background information to understand exactly what the GNRC is and how it has benefited our city. So with those additions, are there any other changes or additions to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda.
So moved.
So, all right, moved and seconded. All those in favor of the agenda as amended, say aye. Aye. Oppose? Carries. The next item is the minutes that were distributed to the committee. Only Alderman or Chairman Skidmore and I were at this meeting, so we'll be acting on these minutes. I have reviewed them, and they look to be accurate and concise. And do we have a motion?
So moved.
So moved, and I second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And opposed? All right, it carries. We will have an action item tonight. I think it will deal with pickleball, but either the mayor or Mr. Eckenroth will bring that to our attention. So without any further ado, and I don't see any members of the public that would be here to wish to address. We do have a couple of aldermen here and the mayor, so welcome aldermen to be here. And let's jump right into it. I will call Mrs. Locke up and ask her to begin her presentation. We have many items to discuss tonight, and we want to ask as many questions as you may have. So if there's no other items, let's turn it over to Ms. Locke.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
So as you stated, we'll begin just with a brief overview of the GNRC, which is the Greater Nashville Regional Council. And concisely, it operates as a council of governments, essentially. And then on a more staff level, as far as my dealings with the GNRC, they work to identify and prioritize transportation projects for federal funds. And so they really kind of oversee the long-range transportation planning for the region, ensure that it's meeting the initiatives from our federal government, and ensure that we're utilizing federal funds appropriately for our projects. And they do also assist us with obtaining additional federal funding for projects where we have shortfalls. So like for our light synchronization project and our Sanders Ferry Greenway project, when those construction bids came in higher than the funding we had available, we were able to get additional funding to meet that threshold. So.
So they also have a council on aging. They also have responsibilities involving, I think, childcare as well, and helping coordinate some federal dollars for that. One of the things that is a little bit confusing is people still talk about the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization. That actually doesn't exist anymore. It's now part of the GNRC. It's called the Transportation Policy Board. So I sit on the council, the Greater Nashville Regional Council. I sit on that. But then I also sit on the Transportation Policy Board as we make some decisions about spending. For the most part, spending on transportation, for the most part, by the time that the decisions come to the full Greater Nashville Regional Council about spending on transportation projects, Sarah and the rest of the technical staff has already scored those projects. And the reason it's technical staff is it really takes very much the politics out of it, which is to our benefit. If we left the politics in it, Nashville could pretty much overrule, Davidson County could pretty much overrule everything that the rest of the members want to do. So it's helpful that we have a technical committee that scores the projects and determines which projects are most important and sort of what schedule they should go on. Okay. Wow. So the best one was probably the synchronization project, because that synchronization project came in so high above what the bid was. The Greater Nashville Regional Council, which typically funds those projects 80% to 20%, we pay 20%, they pay 80%. Since the cost of that came in so much higher than we had anticipated, the Greater Nashville Regional Council, instead of saying go back out for bids or scale back the project, what they told us was we have some money because we anticipated that inflation was going to have this impact, and so we took it to a vote of the Greater Nashville Regional Council to increase what GNRC was going to provide for that project. There were, I think on that vote, there were probably 4 or 5 other projects sort of in a similar situation, and GNRC was prepared because of what inflation was doing to projects. They knew that that was likely to come. What they were able to do is some projects that weren't happening along the timeline, some other projects that weren't happening in the timeline that they had anticipated, they basically took some money out of those to fund the projects that were happening faster than some other ones. And it was very much to our benefit. They continued the 80% match, even though the price tag for the synchronization went up drastically. We continued our 20% match, and it did not delay that project anymore.
It's a 80-20 split, correct?
Pretty much everything comes out of GNRC through the Transportation Policy Board. Pretty much everything that comes out of GNRC that involves transportation is a 80-20 split.
And the Walton Ferry, Old Shackle, that wasn't GNRC, was it? That was a state.
That was a state project that we contributed to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any questions? Yes. Alderman Peterson.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry about
Cue the balloons.
I should say that there are some projects that are state funded that still go through GNRC because they need to keep accounting them for the Federal Highway Administration.
Thank you. My question is, do we pay GNRC a fee?
So we do. We pay it based on the population, and that I think they reassess that about every 3 years. What that allows us to do is that allows us to have a role on the Greater Nashville Regional Council making some of those decisions. If we were not a member of the GNRC, we would still get some federal money. However, I'd much rather be a decision of how and when and what. I'd much rather be part of the decision-making body that determines how and when and which projects that money goes to than just accepting money based on how way somebody else votes on it. We have had those discussions about how costly it has gone up, and part of that is because of staff. They have a very robust staff, but for the most part, that's because of the size of the region. Memphis is pretty good size, but then you've got some other regions that aren't quite that size, and it's a topic of conversation very often.
And are there private consulting firms that offer the same services that GNRC does?
Probably, but not ones that have the responsibility of funneling money from the federal government. So they do provide us with some planning services. They do provide us, obviously, with transportation money, with some aging and some child care, I should say, advice. And there are other consultants that do that we would have to pay for. But those other consultants don't have the millions and millions of federal tax dollars that GNRC has.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? The only question I have, Mayor, are there conditions or stipulations when we take that money that we're obliged to live up to?
There are, but most of those stipulations come from the fact that it's federal dollars, or if there's state dollars involved. That's where really the stipulations come from. GNRC is going to make sure that we abide by those because they want to make sure that the money that they accepted continues to be used in the way that it was expected to be used.
But by using GNRC money, we're not giving up any authority or autonomy?
No, not a bit.
Okay.
Not a bit.
Okay, that's,
So-
okay.
I appreciate you asking that question.
Yeah, any other comments? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank
You know, to add to that, we could ask GNRC for more. We don't ask them for that much more because we feel like the consultants that we have through our staff and through our public works staff and our planning staff are certainly worthwhile the money we spend on them. It just makes sense for us to go out and get some folks that know Hendersonville that well, especially in the situation where we've hired those consultants long term. We've got no obligation to go over to GNRC and have them be our consultants, and there's no stipulations that they get any authority over how we spend other dollars.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Ms. Locke, I forgot to mention, I asked Mr. Eckenroth to pass out to you ordinance 1989-24. This is the ordinance that established the Capital Projects Committee. So if you want to know, the history and the limits of our authority and jurisdiction, this ordinance provides that insight. So thank you, Mr. Eckenroth, for that. I also forgot, Ms. Locke, to ask everyone to go around the room and just for the record, state your name and what ward you represent and what committee that you're chair of. Ms. Dixon, you want to begin?
I'm Alderman in Ward 4, and I am the chairman of, sorry, Karen Dixon. I'm Alderman in Ward 4, and I'm the chairman of the Finance Committee.
I'm Terry Goodwin, Alderman, Ward 4, and I'm the chairman of Public Safety Committee.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Mark Skidmore. I am Alderman from Ward 1, and I'm chairman of the Public Works Committee.
Lee Peterson, Chairman of General Committee and Alderman for Ward 2.
We also have Alderman Garza and Garton with us tonight to participate. So thank you. All right. Now the floor is yours, Ms. Locke.
All right. So we'll start with New Shackle Island Road and Old Drakes Creek Road intersection. This was a project that we had appropriated funds for, but began communications with the county. And since this was the intersection of a state route and a county road, they have gone to the GNRC and requested additional funding for an older project that was in the TIP, and they are going to manage that. So they did receive the additional funding, and through some coordination with the city and the county, it was agreed upon that the county would pay 10% of the 20% share, and the city would pay 10%, or 10% of the share, of the split. So we have made our payment to the county, and they have acknowledged receipt of that, and will be initiating the project through TDOT local programs. So it will, the process through local programs obviously takes a few years really to get through the NEPA design, right of way, all of those different phases, but they are beginning that process now.
Questions? This is in Ward 6, and I know that Alderman Waters and I receive a lot of questions. This really is the access point from Durham Farms and all of the growth, even in Ward 5, that want to get to Glenbrook. So thank you so much for that report. So the money has, GNRC, the governance board has approved the additional money for this. Now we're at the process of getting a consultant to do what?
So the county, they will initiate the project through local programs, and then they'll begin they'll put out a request for qualifications for a design consultant. And so then they'll contract with a design consultant to begin the environmental process.
And our portion of that was how much?
$220,000.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions regarding the item A? Alderman Peterson.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Is White House Utility District contributing to this project? Because I think this might affect their property.
It does. I had a meeting with them, probably about 4 months ago, and they're happy to contribute some land without charging us for it. There's a couple items in there that it makes the grade separation there makes it a little bit difficult. But they're very, very happy to help out. So it's a very good conversation I had with them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item B,
Okay.
this is some good news, I think.
Yes. So we have we submitted initial application and we've gone through some comments for the ARPA non-competitive stormwater funds. And this is for water infrastructure improvements. And we this is non-competitive as I said. So the amount is ours as long as we have all of the qualifying projects. So the total amount of the funded portion is approximately 4.4 million. And then we have a 35% share, which puts us at approximately 1.5 million. So that's a total project bucket of approximately 6 million in stormwater projects that we have submitted for. One of those being the Drake's Creek roundabout, the construction of that. We do have a completion timeline required through this application for September, December of 2026. And so we believe that we can meet that deadline with these projects. Almost $1 million of what we submitted were projects that we have already completed. So that would just be money back into our stormwater fund, which would be a great benefit to the city.
Any other projects? I know you mentioned the roundabout, but that doesn't require all of that funding. So any other
No.
projects that come to the top of your mind?
One of them is Maple Road Boulevard storm infrastructure. Currently, the way the roadway was constructed, it has curb, but it doesn't have the storm infrastructure along a certain portion of that. And so we've been working through the design process to go back in and install the storm infrastructure. So we did include that, and I want to say that was approximately $750,000 of it. And then the roundabout was just over 3 million. And then, like I said, it was approximately 1 million of projects that we already completed. The other projects, I apologize, I can't remember offhand, but I can share a list of what we submitted. Many of them are contained within our 2-year stormwater list that we have on our website.
Questions? So the money that we've already spent that we're going to be, I guess, reimbursed for,
Mm-hmm.
will that be able to be used for the match?
I believe so. It would go back to, it could potentially go back to our stormwater fund, I believe. And so then we could utilize that for our portion. And many of these, like I said, are projects we were going to be doing anyways. We've already programmed for, so
Okay,
we're in a
great.
good position.
That's great. So
Yeah.
that saved our budget where we were planning on spending money for those projects.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Okay. Good work, staff. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have
Thank
one. I believe we can use ARPA funds for projects dating back to 2020. Is that correct?
I believe it was 2021, March of 2021, I believe was the back date on that.
Okay, because you said we've already spent $1 million on some projects that have already been completed,
Mm-hmm.
but I was wondering if we had other projects going back to 21.
We evaluated them. There were some that were not, they would not qualify for the funding. There are certain requirements to utilize these funds. And so we did go through those pretty much one by one with the consultants and do some desktop reviews and see what they felt would be, a qualifying project. We were really trying to get it buttoned up before we ever submitted. We had a couple questions come back, but we're addressing those, and we should be resubmitting this next week. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
Have we received the money?
No,
Okay.
no.
Thank you. Fire hall number 7.
All right. Since the last time we met, we had just issued the notice to proceed for construction at our last meeting. We have been moving along. They've made a lot of progress. In early December, there was a discrepancy that was found through our third-party testing with thickened slabs and CMU block. And so we have just we went through a couple of rounds of additional third-party testing. Our structural engineer has accepted resolutions to the discrepancies, and so we are moving forward as of the 17th. And so we may end up seeing, it's possible we'll see a 30-day slide in schedule, just depending on weather days and things like that. But we are moving forward and on budget.
Questions?
Thank you, Chairman. What were the actual discrepancies? I drove out there to look, and there was I didn't go out there a couple of weeks or anything like that, but a week's worth, and there was no work being done on the project, and that concerned me. But I didn't call up here and start raising Cain about it, because I don't operate that way anymore.
Sure.
I used to,
Sure.
but I don't anymore. But what were the discrepancies with the slab situation with that? Because I noticed there was no work being done, and
Yeah.
that concerns me when I see that.
So there were some areas where they were intended to be thickened slabs
Right.
for moment, for non-load bearing walls. And the third-party tester had not observed their installation, and so we went back and did some core samples, and are now moving forward.
All
with
right,
a
so did they
solution.
have to rip up the slab? and
No.
redo? They did not have to do that?
No,
Okay, good.
no, they'll not be doing that.
All right. One question that I need to ask, and I don't know if you know this or not, because it's one that it escaped me under the contract for the fire hall.
Mhm.
Are there any penalties? Because it appears to me that that's a standard, in construction, especially the fire hall, that the third party has to observe what they're doing, and they just didn't do it. And I'm not saying that any money is owed, but I'm just curious if things like this happen again. In my experience, there have been penalties, and I didn't know if there was some in this contract. Or you may not know.
Yeah, I'd have to really look at that
Okay.
again. I would imagine there probably is something in there about it. We have implemented some additional checkpoints, basically, where they have to fill out a form and send it to us and ensure that we have someone present for different items, like milestones that have been identified
Right.
since this has surfaced. So I think that we are in a really good position. I don't think that we'll have any additional situations like this. Some of it was beyond the contractor's control with the CMU block. So I don't foresee additional issues at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Locke, remind us again, with the 30-day delay, what is the estimated completion date of the fire hall?
That hasn't been finalized. That's probably a little preliminary.
Okay. And
But
can you tell us what the projected budget was for the fire hall? Was it five something million, wasn't it?
sure. Yeah, it was $5,563,040. And Jason, would you please put up the project directory? Thank you. Oh, it doesn't quite fit up there. But on your sheet for item C, it also does have the project estimates, third column from the right
Okay.
as well. Thank you.
Great. Okay, no other questions?
Just one.
Okay, Alderman Peterson.
Ms. Locke, I remember we had some damage to Fire Hall number 3, I believe, during the recent cold weather. I think some pipes burst. Are they making efforts to make sure that these pipes are insulated while they're under construction? Because I think drywall might have to be removed at existing fire halls to ensure that pipes don't burst in the future. But I was hoping that maybe they would address that during construction and make sure pipes are properly insulated.
Yes, so that is something that we're going to be including in that contract. We've put out a request for qualifications or proposal, one of them, to address, because there were various locations actually, to address that, and part of that will be prevention for future reoccurrences.
Perfect, thank
Yes,
you.
sir. Yeah.
Okay, no further questions? Go ahead, please.
Okay. Moving along to rugby bathrooms. We've been going back and forth with CXT, which is who we are purchasing the prefab concrete structure from through the holidays. It was a little difficult to get responses, but we did receive the resubmitted estimate along with the revised design per our comments. And so we're reviewing those and hope to be moving forward with that pretty soon. And it is still estimated to be within the budget that we currently have for this project.
And the projected start date this summer,
Yes,
or the complete, I mean, it should go pretty quick if it's,
it should. It's the lead
Pre-built.
time on the structure.
and part of that project, I think, also calls for an improvement to the entrance to the rugby fields. Because there's a lot of water standing there, and it's not a good entrance. What's the schedule for that improvement of the entrance, the concrete, and
Yeah.
a better entrance?
So, I'm sorry, I didn't recall that the entrance was part of this site work. We are in the process of getting an updated site plan for the site preparation for the prefab structure. I'll have to verify that the entrance was part of that. But
Okay.
maybe Jesse has a
Here,
response to
here
it.
comes the reinforcements.
Yeah, so because the building's a prefab, we're going to issue a notice to bid for someone to come in and do the site work. So when we have an estimated time when that building shows up, we will include it like a concrete apron or an asphalt apron for the entryway to turn off where the restroom's at. So it will be included in the site work,
Okay.
and that date will be determined by when we get a shipping date. Because the bids are only good for so long, so if we went out and got a bid right now, and it was 4 to 5 or 6 months before we could receive the prefabbed restroom, then we'd have to go back and rebid for new pricing. But we will include the entry, either concrete or asphalt apron off the roadway when we do that project.
But we are receiving communication from the company that won the bid for the building,
Yes, sir.
and they have committed to deliver the product whenever,
Yes, sir.
by the summer. Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any questions. So, Drake's Creek widening.
Okay. This project is in right of way now. The title reports are complete. They are, the subconsultant is working on the appraisals now, and then shortly they'll begin utility coordination and staking out there. So moving right along for that phase.
Questions? I've seen out there several surveyors. Is that part of this project? Are they out there surveying and?
That's possible. That's
Okay.
possible. It could be part, I don't know if it's outside, but it could be part of the other work on Stop 30.
But the ROW is complete, did you say?
We're in right of way now.
Uh,
That's the phase that we're in.
Meaning we're purchasing right away?
We're in the early stages.
Negotiations?
Yes, sir. Yeah. They're preparing the appraisals now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Alderman Waters?
Excuse me. Since it's in our ward, Mr. Chairman, can you describe exactly what they're going to be doing from A to Z?
Sure. So,
Starting back at the intersection?
yeah, so the main goal of this project is to raise the intersection out of the floodplain. So there will be an elevation change. They'll be replacing the box bridge there. They'll be widening that. The approaches will be gaining capacity. They'll be adding turn lanes. And then, of course, upgrading the traffic signal. Now, right now, it's wood pole and span wire, and they'll have mast arms and more formal traffic signal.
Will we be adding any lanes going up to New Shackle Island from there?
Not as part, there will be just right at the intersection, there'll be a turn lane added, but that widening is not outside of the area of influence of the
Be turning
intersection.
lanes at NSI,
I'm sorry?
the turn lane at NSI.
No, sir. This is only at Drake's Creek and Stop 30.
You mentioned a turning lane. I thought you was referring to the turning lane up at the New Shackle Island and Stop 30.
No, that would be a separate project. This is Drake's Creek and Stop 30. But they'll be adding turn lanes as part of this project.
Oh, we got one. You gonna add another one?
For the approaches that don't currently have turn lanes, they'll be added. I can't recall exactly now the configuration. I apologize. I should have brought that, but they will be adding. Mainly, I think the addition will be for the Stop 30 approaches to have turn lanes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You know, with all of the land that's available on Stop 30, there's going to be a lot of development in that area. So I hope that we do plan in this phase to have enough turn lanes and, you know, to handle what I project increase congestion there.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
okay. Thank you. Okay, no questions on that. Please proceed.
Okay. Drake's Creek Road Roundabout, we are also in the right-of-way phase for that project. We did hold one property owner notification meeting. It was not well attended, but we have since acquired a simple fee appraisal for the properties that we need to acquire right-of-way from. And so we are in the process of coordinating another property notification meeting to discuss those appraisal amounts and to move forward with the utility coordination. We are still working through that as well. But moving along on schedule.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Okay. Walton Ferry Old Shackle realignment project. That is still in right of way. TDOT has updated stating that they are nearing completion. They still have some of the regular tracks that they're working on closing, and then there are 2 CSX tracks that they're still working through as well. They do currently have this project scheduled for an August 2023 letting. So hoping to see that happen.
Now, when you say letting, taking bids,
Yes, sir.
when's a realistic start date for that if the bids are in the fall? I don't know what the process is with
Yeah.
the state after they let it.
For a state managed project, I'm not sure for their turnaround times, I'll be honest, but I would anticipate at least a 4-month turnaround.
But the portion of the city cost is not going to go up, correct?
Well, they are also working on updating the estimates because as the estimates are based on the TDOT unit prices, and we've seen pretty significant inflation. So they're working on updating that estimate now. We may see an increase in the city's portion. It's possible.
But our portion has been budgeted and it's available, or have we already deposited it?
We have already paid our 20%
Okay.
of the last estimate. So for now, we've already paid our portion.
And,
But if
and-
that estimate goes up, it's possible.
And it's estimated around $9 million
For the construction,
for
yes,
the
sir.
construction
The
of that.
total project, I want to say was right around 15 million.
So, committee members, do y'all get questions on that project? I know I do, all the time, oh Lord, how long, as I hear, so.
I
Yeah.
did 20 years ago.
That was your
Yeah.
junior year in high school,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Mr. Booth?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on 2 of these tracks owned by CSX. Do we see any issues getting that cleared up?
This is a state managed project. We actually are not very involved in the communications. So they don't foresee any issues having this cleared up. So I would have to say I don't, but I haven't been involved in the
Okay.
negotiations.
Well, that's good that it's moving along. I know it's been yeah. Okay, thank you.
If I could add one thing, I've had conversations with State Representative William Lambert about this, and he knows that we're disappointed that it's been dragged out, and he's keeping an eye on it.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Next.
All right. Mary's Magical Place, berm. So I think preliminarily shared last meeting that we have received a potential notice of violation from FEMA as part of our submittal on this project. We had some bridges that were constructed around 2009, 2010 that were not mapped in the floodway. So we are still working through that. It's been a little challenging getting responses from some of the staff at FEMA to some of the questions from our consultant on how to proceed and what they need to see to resolve the issue. But I do have a proposal in hand that I received this week to review for the consultant to remap that whole reach for Drake's Creek, including, mapping the bridges that were not previously mapped, and then evaluating for mitigation measures, because we will need to, if the base flood elevation is correct, then we do need to mitigate that as much as possible. So that'll be something that we continue to work through, and likely we'll be bringing something back to mitigate some of an increase.
Well, the estimated start time, it says on here, is spring 22. We know that's not accurate.
That's not accurate.
So we
no,
really
sir.
don't know when it's going to
That's
start
right.
because it's in the hands of the federal government
That's right.
right now.
And depending on how that works out, they may not approve a berm. It's possible they may not approve fill in the floodway at all. But we will continue to work through that and for the best outcome for the city.
I knew that'd get you, Chairman Skidmore.
Yeah. Well, it matters.
Yes,
All right,
well,
all right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, when I saw that, that's so funny because he saw it lit up as soon as my light. What are the bridges there's a discrepancy on that?
So there's a pedestrian bridge
Yeah.
near the park, and then there's the bridge on Saundersville near Sam's.
And how long ago did our consultants at that time, did they not realize that there was a discrepancy there?
I don't actually have that information
Okay,
available.
well, it's important that we recognize this because as these projects go by, we can't allow, these mistakes to continue. I mean, I hate to be the one that's,
Yeah.
I'm usually high on all these projects and I still am, but
Mhm.
at the same time, it's like we go 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Yeah.
And I don't like that kind of politics or governing our city, period. That it doesn't look good that happens. I'm not saying it's any of our fault. I know it's not the board's fault or city staff,
Mhm.
but it is the people that we choose, and they should know better than to have some of these things happen. I'm quite concerned. In fact, if these folks come back, and I don't want to know at this point, maybe outside this room, I can ask you who they were, but I'd look at them twice. That should not happen. And so I know the pedestrian, you said the walkway was one.
Mhm.
What was the other one again?
Saundersville Road near Sam's Club, Hobby Lobby.
Yeah, we've had
Back
some
there.
problems with that bridge anyway, from a public works standpoint, with the flooding issues and things like that. I'm not surprised about that one after, of course, and looking at it and what's done. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you,
You're welcome.
Chairman.
Any other questions?
Yes. The 530 that's our expense, right?
That's the estimated expense. Yes, sir.
It's all on us though, right?
That's correct.
Is there no flood insurance that we can rely on?
No, sir.
No?
No. I think that was the reason for the inline relocation was the insurance claims that had come through. So I don't think that we can rely on flood insurance for that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have just one.
Yes, Alderman Peters.
Ms. Locke, you said you mentioned mitigation. Would that include replacing these two bridges?
It could include that, but there may be alternatives. I couldn't really speak to all of those today, certainly. I'm not I don't do flood mapping. I don't have a lot of experience with that specifically, but there could be some opportunities to remove fill from the floodway, possibly. Um, there could be opportunities for the bridge replacement could be one. Now, FEMA's response through our call did state that we mitigate to the maximum extent possible. And then if we still have an increase, then we go through their public notification process, which is standard, to send out letters to anyone potentially affected by an increase, allow public comment, feedback, and appeal. And then it may potentially be accepted if we've mitigated to the maximum extent possible. So we're still we're really in the early stages still of evaluating what those options would be.
Because we really don't have any choice to stop Marys from flooding every time we get an abundance of rain.
Not right now, but on the positive side, over the last couple of years, we haven't had any issues out there. So thankfully, for now, it seems to be all right. But at this time, we don't have any option to construct anything in the floodway that would negatively impact the flood elevation.
And that is on the city, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
And if I could just add also, as far as floodplain management, I don't know what the practice was prior, but we have the National Flood Insurance Program ordinance in place, and we do monitor this with any new development, any of our projects. We are watching, our floodplain administration to ensure that we are doing what we need to do with our projects now. So I don't anticipate seeing this with any of our new projects.
So what the city did back in 2009, I believe, is that we failed to get these bridges approved in the way that they may affect the navigation or the flow of the creek.
That's an assumption. I honestly don't have the records, but based on where we are today, that's an assumption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we have to replace those bridges, we're looking at millions and millions of dollars. It'd probably be cheaper to relocate Mary's Magical Place than to build new bridges down there. Okay. Well, please keep the committee informed as you receive more information.
Okay.
And maybe the staff should look at, maybe we can't build a berm, but can we do anything like a retaining wall or anything at Mary's Magical Place, to try to mitigate some of the potential flooding.
Mm-hmm.
And just keep praying like we've had the last 2 years, no flooding. So,
Yeah.
okay. Next item. Thank you.
Yes. Sanders Ferry Walking Trail. This project is in construction now. We issued the notice to start on October 5th. So we are approximately 30% through the project now. They have been making good, consistent progress. So far, we're still on schedule, on budget. So moving right along, it's been a really good project so far.
Okay. Thank you.
Light synchronization project is also in the construction phase. We issued the notice to proceed on October 5th with a completion date of December 31st of 2023. We haven't broken ground yet. We extended the project timeline for material lead times for the traffic equipment. They've been rather extensive, but most of the equipment actually is in now. And I have a meeting scheduled for February 1st with the contractors to discuss their plan of attack, essentially where they're going to start. So we will potentially see some temporary lane closures as they install fiber, but those will be advertised ahead of time, communicated. So we are making progress on that as well.
And remind the committee and those aldermen that may not be aware this is phase 1.
Yes, sir.
So
That's correct.
So
Yeah, this is the infrastructure.
Yeah, this is the interconnection between the lights with
Yes, sir.
fiber optic cables, and so that they can communicate,
Yes.
so the staff can communicate with them, with
Yes.
the lights, correct?
That's right. They will communicate back to City Hall, so we'll have a traffic operations center here.
And then the second phase, which the final phase, give us a brief overview of that.
The second phase will include the retiming synchronization, and will also include new detection for our intersections, which will be very reliable. It'll be a combination of radar and video, which will also help us in seeing what's going on out at the intersections if we're looking at it remotely. One thing I would like to mention with synchronization, just to be transparent, it doesn't fix all of the traffic problems. It will give priority to our major corridors. They will have more green time, and our side streets will end up waiting a little longer. But it ensures that when you start on the west end of town, you get through the east side of town much quicker.
And also Indian Lake, correct?
Yes, sir. Indian Lake and New Shackle.
And New Shackle, all the way from Main Street down to Glenbrook?
Yes, Main Street to Glenbrook. That's correct.
So really the improvements that the public will see is after phase two, correct? As far as flow.
Yes, I think most people will not notice as much of an improvement with phase one as they will after phase two.
But is it not true that phase one gives us the ability to more quickly adapt to
Yes, sir.
changing traffic patterns, so the traffic engineer, if we can ever hire one, would be able to monitor that and make, real-time changes to the signalization?
That's correct.
Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
So phase two, I'm really interested when we can begin that process. I know it can't begin until phase one, but can we start to do the bidding process or moving forward on that? So when this project is completed at the end of this year, correct? Phase
Yes.
one,
That's right.
that boom, we can jump right into phase two and be ready to go guns a-blazing?
That's what we're working toward. The phase two project is in the NEPA process currently. We have a submittal in. There are approximately, I think, 9 different environmental divisions of TDOT it has to go through for comment. We're still waiting on one. So when we get the comments back as a package, our consultant will review those and update. But once we have our environmental approval, that rest of the process should move pretty quickly. There's no right-of-way involved. And they do have the plans to approximately 75% complete right now. So we are in a good position as soon as we get our environmental approval, but that can be challenging.
Yeah, I hope that we can I hope we can let the bid out right as close to the completion of phase one as possible.
That's what we're pushing for.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And we're going to push you on that as well.
That's fine.
I hear more about that than anything, I believe. Chairman Peterson, you have a question? Oh, okay.
What's the timeline for phase two to be finished? What's the estimate to get?
It's transparently, it's just very difficult to estimate with local programs. They have quite an extensive process, and it goes through many iterations typically of review. So I would say the completion timeline on that would be the end of 2024, hopefully constructed. That's what we're working toward. But it's heavily dependent on TDOT local programs process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Alderman Dixon?
What is the cost, what is the estimated cost for phase two?
I didn't bring that with me, but I want to say it's right around 2.5 million.
Okay.
Now, once we get further along in design and they update those construction estimates, we just see them. They continue to increase every year as everything else does.
I was hoping it would be significantly less. since
Yes.
This was the infrastructure, but
Yeah.
thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. The detection is pretty expensive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So do you get monthly reports on this?
I do.
So I guess the reports indicate they have purchased the infrastructure needed, the fiber optic interconnection cable and so forth.
For
And so they're
phase
ready
one?
to move for phase one.
Yes, sir.
Okay. good.
Yes. Yeah,
Good.
they have the equipment.
And-
One more. Oh, I'm
Okay.
sorry. Go ahead.
Alderman Peterson.
Thank you. We had an accident 2 weekends ago at New Shackle Island and Main Street,
Yes.
and that took out that light. Once you move the traffic to City Hall, I believe, to the control center, would that eliminate problems like that in the future?
No, because the interconnect is to the cabinet, so we'll need the cabinet regardless, at least for our technology today. So it wouldn't eliminate that. If it were totaled the way that cabinet was, we would encounter the same problem. But we are taking steps to procure an additional cabinet, kind of as a spare to have on hand. So if something like that does happen, we can get out and replace it quicker and get the intersection operational faster.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Do any of the aldermen in the audience have any questions or comments? Okay. If you do, just raise your hand when an issue comes forward. Okay, now, the big show that we've been waiting on.
Yes. All right.
Exit 8.
We'll just jump right on in then.
That's in Ward 5, right?
Uh,
Okay, exit 8.
So I've prepared a PowerPoint for this
Okay.
project. We'll kind of go through some of the details and the history. Let's see. So this is a project overview of the current design, how it aligns with Saundersville Road, Main Street. It is intended to be a tunnel under the railroad. This is the rendering of the tunnel. So some of the history as far as how we got here. There was an approval in the early 2000s for a project that realigned Saundersville Road and affected the ramps for TDOT. And so they, due to the grade crossing, they made a requirement of that approval to remove the crossing and realign Saundersville Road to Main Street. So in 2009, they reinforced that requirement, and then in 2015, they also have followed up with the city and again reinforced that requirement. So in 2016, the city selected design consultants AECOM to begin design on this project. So for the estimates, when we submitted initially in 2015, when we initiated the project, the estimate was $5 million. And that was
I vote to approve that.
some notes on the estimate. When we initiate a project, the estimates are very high level. They're very preliminary. We don't know a lot of the design details. So this was prior to environmental, prior to CSX coordination, and prior to design. At that time, we also received $4 million in state local interchange connector funding, LIC. And that is a 50-50 split. So the state was going to contribute $2 million and we would contribute $2 million. And then we would have an additional $1 million liability. In 2019, when we were beginning right-of-way, or preparing to begin right-of-way, that was kind of an intermediate estimate. We had identified some stream impacts, had a more clear picture of CSX requirements and more defined project scope. Our right-of-way and construction estimate at that time were roughly $16 million when you include our design costs. And now in 2022, they updated the estimate to account for inflation. These estimates are based upon the TDOT unit prices, so they are not inflated beyond what TDOT has been seeing in the rest of their projects. And this is, again, a further refined scope. And so if we were to construct this project in 2022, it was estimated to be approximately $28 million. And then we assumed inflation rates, which hopefully were overly conservative. So as you can see, that increases annually. Some history on what we've done to try and gain funding for this project. In 2015, when we were getting ready to initiate through TDOT, we applied for a Federal Railroad Association grant for $1 million, which we did not receive. In 2019, we applied for a build grant for roughly $16 million. Also, were not successful. In 2020, we applied for both a build and a Chrissy grant, different amounts, but also were not successful in those applications. In discussions with our consultants and evaluating the new criteria under the current administration, it's been determined that we're not competitive for the federal grants when you look at the criteria related to the crossing, the graded crossing as far as TDOT's plan for the worst crossings, things like that. When you look at the crash criteria, when you look at our demographics on a national level, we're just not competitive. So our options to consider moving forward are to fund the project locally at 100%, consider funding the project through financing, seek cooperative funding from the county and state, consider alternatives to the current project, or to cancel the project, which would put us in a negative position with TDOT, honestly, which the mayor may be able to speak.
And Ms. Locke,
More to that.
let me ask you a question.
Sure.
How much money have we received from the state to fund this project thus far, approximately?
I would say, I think we've expended approximately $900,000 toward design currently, so we would have received half of that as
Okay,
a reimbursement.
a little less than 500. So
Yes.
if we cancel the project, if we could cancel it, what would we have to pay the state the $500,000?
We would look into that further. I think typically they would say we would be obligated to reimburse, but we would do what we could to work
Okay.
through that.
Okay.
That's a question I was actually going to address. There's also the problem that we may not get funding from the state for future projects if we were to back out of this project. If I could speak a little bit more, Sarah hit the highlights very, very, very well. Consider alternatives to the current project. At this point, we've looked at all sorts of alternatives, and to play around anymore, I think just delays this project anymore. I've had conversations. Chairman Robertson have had conversations. I think some aldermen have conversations with our state representatives and been very that have been very cooperative and possibly helpful in seeking some state money. I've also had some conversations with some folks at the county that are interested in helping our portion. Right now, our portion is 100%. What we're hoping for is the state could reduce that to maybe 20, maybe 50, something less than 100%. And those conversations are going well. Part of the hang up in those conversations is that we've heard from CSX that they don't think that they think our estimate is too high. And so our question to them is, what is a reasonable estimate, which is important to the state, so that if they're going to provide some funding, how much do they provide if it's based on a percentage? Representative William Lambert has a better track record of getting a response from CSX than any of us do.
So, questions from the committee members first,
If it's a
and
hard
then Alderman Waters?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor, you just mentioned the CSX involvement in this. They said the estimate was too high. What part are they playing in this development? Anything?
So,
I mean, the tracks are going to have to be moved, right?
and then replaced.
But they're not getting involved as far as helping the city, or helping the community?
We had a phone conversation with them November, and I was pretty blunt. I asked them how much they would be willing to contribute, and they were pretty blunt.
What'd they say?
None. Uh, they don't feel like it's their project. And I made a point that they will have essentially an overpass that will be wider than what they have right now. The overpass will allow for 2 tracks. Right now they just have 1. They didn't see that as a benefit.
That's pathetic, pathetic. Uh, So we have the choice of just dropping it and leaving it like it is today? And I know you said it's gonna hurt our integrity and all that, but, with the state. But I can't understand why the CSX would get involved. I mean, you've talked to them, what's their answer besides no?
So in talking with the State Department of Transportation, with ongoing conversations, CSX was there longer than that road was. And they've made that clear on many projects throughout the state. And that's true, they were. And so, the problem was putting a road, at grade crossing at that road. And since it was the residents of Sumner County and Hendersonville that have done that and allowed it and maintained it, it's our responsibility to replace it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I have a question. If we voted to cancel that and CSX comes in and says, we're not gonna allow access, is that a possibility? And if it is, then you cut off people getting in and out in another, is that a possibility of that happening?
There are, and I'm glad you brought that up. We should have mentioned that before, that if CSX feels like this crossing is too dangerous, they could close it. And I think TDOT also could have that possibility. Am I?
I don't think for CSX
Okay.
necessarily, but they could,
So
That-
get TDOT, get CSX to close.
Yeah, and that's a hard sell for CSX to do that because right now this crossing doesn't rank in the top couple hundred of dangerous crossings in all of Tennessee. We know that because we've applied for funding based on how dangerous it is, and we've been told it's not dangerous enough. So for CSX to close it, that's
that's not a
yeah, that's
reality.
no.
I was just thinking of the access for people and
Yeah.
emergency equipment and different things, if that
Very true.
access was cut off.
Very true.
Alderman Collins, you want to come up here so they can hear you? Oh, you have a question?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I wanted to let everybody else speak, about the situation. I have a lot to say about it, but I'm going to limit my comments. One, publicly, for that feeling, because some of the comments that I would say tonight, I don't know that any of us would appreciate what I've got to say about this project. Because I was on the board when this all came up. Although I supported it at the time because I had no option. I did not support it back then. I was very vocal and very critical of it. In fact, the Public Works Committee was very vocal and very critical of it. We felt back when this originally started that this wasn't even the place that it should be. It should be on up Saundersville Road, but the powers that be, and not this administration, I got to emphasize that. This is important for people to know. It wasn't this mayor's administration, it was the one previous to us, pushed it to be where it is. And of course, at that time, I'm going to be politically straight up with you. You know, during that time, I was in an island just about all by myself. So I understand what you're going through. And I don't like it. And I hope it doesn't ever happen to you. And you know what I'm talking about. But I've been there, so I know. And I won't let that happen to you. I promise you. You know, it fell upon deaf ears, you know, and I opposed it. I will not, under no circumstances, and I'll tell you just like I said 7 to 8 years ago, I will not vote to support $30 million to to go against the city because you're going to bankrupt the city. You can't do that. There's no way that you can come up with this city as prosperous as it is, that we're going to spend $30 million and put that on the taxpayers' back to do that. I'm not going to support that. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think the Board of Mayor and Aldermen will support that. Think about what you're doing on this project. This was a project that was bad to begin with at the way that it's been proposed. As far as canceling the project, about the $500,000, I can tell you right now, you're going to have to pay it back because that's what the contract, I can guarantee you that's what it said. Now, they may, with our relationship, because we've got a really good relationship with not only the governor's office, but the state legislature. And if we can work out a deal where they can just waive it, or even, I'm just going to be politically incorrect, just look the other way on that project. And they say, okay, we don't have to pay that $500,000 back, but I'm pretty sure, because they've got to answer to people too. It's just not us. They're going to say, I'm going to need that $500,000 back, and it's going to be done. We're going to have to. As far as the relationship with TDOT, I'm going to leave that at that because we've got a good relationship with them, and I think that it would put us back. I do believe that it will put us back with particular projects that happen to the city. And we're going to have that relationship with TDOT because think where we are for a minute. We're 12 miles out of Nashville, and I would say the majority of the people that live in Hendersonville drive to Nashville and back either 5 days a week or 7 days a week. They do that, at least in my constituency they do. And I'm not going to hold hostage to part of the city, at least my side of the city in the peninsula of wards 3, 1, and 6, and 2. I'm not going to put them at that hostage because even if you do that, come out at 5 o'clock at night and you'll see Vietnam vets. It's backed up going into Ward 5. And I'm not going to do that. And I just don't foresee the aldermen wanting to do that. We're going to have some serious discussions. We can sit here and talk about it all night, and I'll close because I can talk an hour for this against this project the way that it is. But we're going to have with the mayor and the aldermen and for capital projects and public works, we're going to have a serious sit-down discussions in his office to see where we're going to go forward with this. Because as it stands, that project is not the answer. It's just not, it's not going to work. 30 million is way high. I don't know how they got it. I don't even remember how they got it to 5 million the first time, but I knew back then. I'm not going to come back and say I told you so because I'm not one of those type aldermen. But I knew it was too low. And I knew that we wouldn't have it now. 7 years later, we're still right where we were, still discussing this project. And I knew it was going to be high. As far as CSXL Railroad, I've got this down. I can tell you my feeling with CSX, and it's no disrespect to CSX because I understand what they are, but they always have been hard to work with because they really do feel we were here first, and they were. But, and I understand that and respect it, and so I've always treaded lightly with CSX in trying to discuss things with them. There's been other projects that I've been involved with CSX, and it was very hard. So I hope you understand where I am, where I'm going with this. I'm disappointed because we're going to have to do something. The city, for some of the new folks that were here, we even had at that time Darrell Woodcock to go down to Nashville to talk to them about realigning I think Jim Waters, my colleague, Vice Mayor Waters, knows about this, that we had him to go down and discuss this to see if we could realign exit 8 to go to Saundersville Road to relieve some of the traffic that still is to this day bad on Vietnam Vets. And I don't know, whatever that project just kind of disappeared, or the suggestion of what they had decided to do. So I don't know whether they just found out at that time that it was too financially and not feasible for the city to do or to work with, or maybe TDOT didn't want to work with it, and that very well could be too. So, but I do want to remind that there has some other options that have been on the table, but that hasn't worked out either. So I guess the point I want to emphasize, and since I've been talking about the history of what happened or where it was and where it's going, is we really are, I don't know, when that'll be up to the mayor's office to really come in, but we're going to have to go in his office or somewhere, whether it be on this board or in his office, to figure out what we're going to do. But we're going to have to move on the project. I mean, it's that simple. As our public works director said, we've applied for every single grant on that project, and we've lost every one of them. And that doesn't bode well for us. That should bode for the project as it stands. So I don't know. We're going to have to figure out something, but it's something that we need to be thinking about in our future. Thank you. And I apologize for belating, but this is one that, man, I have always had concerns about. So thank you very much. Thank you.
I think, Alderman Collins, did you have a comment? No, okay. Alderman Peterson.
Yeah, thank you, Alderman Skidmore, for bringing up grants. And if you could go back a couple to that, and I appreciate the city applying for grants. It really offsets the cost of these projects. We were turned down for all of these. Do we know why? Are these competitive grants, and are they issued annually?
They are competitive grants, and I believe they are issued annually. We just were not competitive in the criteria. There's no politically correct way to say this, I guess, but there haven't been any fatalities at this crossing. So it just doesn't rank very high in their
So
criteria.
is that the demographics, is fatalities?
It's one of the criteria.
When the Biden administration came in, the criteria shifted a little bit to also consider poverty, equity, and some other criteria that weren't really safety based. When that happened, our consultant AECom told us they're happy for us to spend more money with them, but they don't see that we're going to be successful.
Okay. Are there any other type of grants that we might qualify for? And do you think CSX would ever contribute to this project?
So the consultant has someone who specializes in grants. She's actually in Washington, and no, she does not believe that there are any current offerings that we would be competitive in. We've evaluated the infrastructure bill offerings that they have that are new, and the criteria we're just not competitive, and the criteria is just really the only way to say it. And then as far as CSX, they were very clear in our discussion that they had no intention of contributing to this project. Essentially, they don't need this project. This crossing is not a concern for them because we have the preemption, we have all the proper signage and pavement markings, and we don't really have collisions at the crossing. So from their perspective, it's not a priority.
And is there alternate exits, maybe closer to town, or maybe even some way to extend Saundersville Road and burrow underneath the tracks and come out at Shoots Lane? Is that even an option?
So I do have some options that we've looked at. One of them is similar to that. One of the issues with that is that then we're outside of our city limits. So our city limits are pretty much right on the west side of Shoots Lane.
So the county could probably come in at 50% and help fund this?
I think it's worth asking.
Because wouldn't that benefit the goat farm?
I would think it would have some benefit to the goat farm.
I appreciate you having some alternates there for us. Thank you.
Yeah.
Want to add one thing is that if the grant application process didn't take as much city resources as it does, we would continue to apply for those, even if the likelihood of being successful were very, very low. The likelihood of being successful is very, very low, almost non-existent. The process to have AECom refile an application for us pretty much is in the tune of $20,000 to $30,000. So I've decided that we need to quit spending that money and quit applying for those grants.
Yeah, and as Alderman Collins is coming up, I do want to say, by virtue of me being chairman of the Capital Projects Committee, I have been in some of the meetings that the mayor has been in with our legislative delegation and other meetings, and I want this committee and the city to know that our mayor is turning every stone he can to try to get the state to agree to fund an additional portion of this expense. In fact, I think the mayor is working with our delegation possibly on legislation that would be presented in this year that would hopefully, but again, you can propose legislation, but that does not mean that it's going to happen. But I think that the mayor and the staff has looked everywhere they can for resources on this. After Alderman Collins, I would like, Sarah, for you to kind of give us a description of the alternatives that I've asked you to look at, and just so that we can have Plan B, I guess. So, Alderman Collins, it's good to have you with us tonight. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm trying to organize my thoughts a little bit so I can be brief because I didn't come prepared to speak. But I wanted to say that I agree with what the mayor was saying in its entirety, that I think that doing further redesigns of the road just postpone us coming to a solution on it. From my perspective, and I believe the perspective of the majority of Ward 5, this is a very important issue. And we've had all of these obstacles that have been, if not completely outside of our control, nearly completely outside of our control, concerning the CSX. That's just a very difficult process to maneuver. The design and then the redesign, and now we've been approved. All parties agree we have a plan that they would be willing to allow us to move forward with. All of those obstacles have been eliminated, save funding, which is not an insignificant obstacle. But further changing the plan and doing redesigns, I think we're putting off the inevitable, and we've seen that the price isn't going to go down, the total price. So I also agree with Alderman Skidmore, in that I don't think it should have been done this way in the first place. And it was a mistake that we need to fix. The $28 million price tag is beyond intimidating. If we did pay for that 100%, I believe I recall that our debt payment on that would be $1.5 million a year. And with a $61 million budget, that's a really significant increase. And we all know we would have to raise taxes to pay for that. Nobody is eager to do that. So, finding other funding sources, that has to be the focus, and that is really the solution. I want to know if because I'm hearing talk about dropping the project, and as a representative of Ward 5, I cannot support completely dropping this project. It is too important to my ward. And I want, the railroad crossing, the only fatality that I'm aware of was actually a homeless person, and potentially that might have been a suicide. And he was not in a vehicle. So, but the safety issues caused by the current configuration of this exit extend well beyond the railroad crossing. A lot of people think about, oh, the traffic backs up on Main Street, and it does in both directions. It can back up all the way, getting close to the Y, and absolutely backs up to Shoot Lane when there's a train at the wrong time of day. Of course, it backs up on Saundersville Road. It's horrible, both directions. But what that means is if you live in Winston Hills, Bluegrass Drive, Stonebrook, not as much River Chase because they do have a light. It can be extremely difficult and dangerous to get out of your neighborhood when the traffic is backed up like that. People don't know to get in the turning lane well before, like about where the vet's office is there in the Lutheran church. That's where you have to get in the turning lane to turn at Thornton's when traffic is backed up, and people don't realize that, so then they're stopped in the middle of the road trying to cut in to get in the turning lane. People are rear-ending each other because they're throwing on their brakes suddenly. Then you have Avondale, where the industrial park is. That we are working to add a turning lane. But it's still very dangerous to turn, particularly to turn left off of Avondale. The entire neighborhood of Windcrest has two exits, Tamara's Way and Windcrest Way. Windcrest Way is very close to the entrance exit ramp that's not part of this project. And when the traffic is backed up, you can't see what's coming. Tamara's Way is near where the hill tops coming down Saundersville Road, and people treat that like they're already on the entrance ramp to the bypass. They're flying, and I just won't even do that. I just turn around and go back to Windcrest Way. The dangers from this are far beyond the railroad crossing. And while we haven't had a fatality at the railroad crossing, we did in the past 6 months have a woman who was hurt right there where the bridge goes over coming down Saundersville Road. And she is still alive, but she is not going to be able to raise her children. She is not going to be able, I hope she is. I don't want to say that because it sounds so, there's reason for hope, but she's lost what her life should have been. And we need to realize that the safety concerns are far beyond just the railroad crossing. That is why I am not going to be able to support dropping this project. I will do anything and everything I can to help get funding elsewhere, but I will not support dropping the project.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Locke, come back to the. You have comment?
Oh, no. Oh, I'm
Okay.
sorry. Thank you.
So I don't think any of us are in favor of not addressing the issue.
Okay.
What I'm interested in hearing from the staff is I asked the staff to come up with some alternatives that could help manage the flow of traffic. We've been told that the railroad crossings, according to objective figures, is not one of the most dangerous in the state, and that's our problem. That's why we can't get grants.
Yeah.
So we got to look I think we have to look at Plan B. If this is 28 to 30 million, that's half of our city budget. I mean, our city budget annual is 60 million. So I do think that we need to try to find a solution. And so would you please give us the results of your
Sure.
your study
Sure.
of alternatives?
I kind of already covered this in the spreadsheet, but I will just highlight our current funding status. Again, we have the $4 million LIC grant fund, state grant. That's a 50-50 split. Our current fiscal year budget for this at this time is approximately 2.5 million, around there. And then I did include just a slide, and Alderman Collins did briefly highlight the financing option. This just is a table that was shared. If we were to finance 20 million and what that annual impact would look like for various.
Can you blow that up?
Timelines.
I can't read that. Well, yeah. So you're looking at a 20, 25, what is it? 20, no, 20, 25, and 30-year note. That's P&I.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not certain about that, but yes, the time frames are correct.
Principal and interest.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Based on 20 million. So why did you come up with 20 million instead of the 30 million or 28 million that you're projecting that it would cost?
Well, we do have some of the funds currently budgeted, and then if it took us a year or two to get to construction, it was assumed we would be able to save some portion toward that as well to pay.
Okay. Did you come up also with what the total cost of the loan would be?
Yes, they're at the bottom. I believe the 20 years was right around 28 million. And then, yes.
So that's 28 million plus the 20 million. So would that be 40 million?
Is that?
Yeah.
Correct? I think it's
Or
just
is it just
28 million total.
So it's $8 million the cost of the loan. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And then it gets worse from there.
Yes, sir.
Gets worse from there. Okay. Any questions on that? If not, all right, alternatives.
Okay. Okay. So, looked at what we thought the project priorities were, safety, convenience, efficient flow of traffic, and emergency services access. So that's kind of the perspective we were coming from and looking at alternatives. The one alternative that does somewhat address all of those is our current project. There's some efficiencies in the overlapping phases for the signal timing. We have undeveloped property available for acquisition, which is more cost effective, I think. And then we do have more favorable intersection offsets than some of the other alternatives. It's kind of a difficult area because we do already have the intersection at Winston Hills, and then with the congestion that we have over on Saundersville Road with the two exits, this does have a more favorable offset. But then looking at safety considerations, we looked at the 2022 State Railroad Grade Crossing Report. They no longer provide a detailed ranking, but we were notified informally that we're no longer in the top 10%. So this hasn't been identified as an extremely dangerous crossing. When we pulled the 5-year crash history, we had 0 fatalities, 3 injuries, and then 24 property damage collisions. It's important to note that we had 0 collisions along 386 resulting from exit 8 queues, and that was a major concern for TDOT. And then we have 0 collisions with the train. So alternative 1 was resulted from a question that we were asked previously of why we didn't align the ramp directly with the connector. And that would be convenient. It would be a convenience alternative. So some of the positives, it is a more direct access, and there is still the undeveloped land for acquisition. Some of the concerns with this option, as I think we've shared previously, are safety with the wrong way traffic on the ramp. We have the loss of signal timing efficiencies, and the grades are, it's quite significant grade differential over here. And then we do have multiple streams to account for, so the environmental impact is a little more.
All right, so how would that alternative, would that only help people going toward Country Hills on Saundersville Road?
That's just a more direct access from the ramp. I don't know that any particular area benefits more from this option than any other area.
So what would be the most immediate improvement of implementing this option?
It would just be the direct access from the ramp. It's just one of the alternatives that we have reviewed.
Because right now they have to come down and get on Saundersville Road and turn left,
Mm-hmm.
and then turn left again if they're going out toward Country Hills Golf Course.
That's right.
So they would miss that intersection. That would ease that intersection.
It would in one way. The complication with this option actually is they may end up waiting longer because this signalized intersection is going to add pedestrian phasing to it. And so that adds approximately 20, sometimes 30 seconds, depending on the width of the intersection, to the signal timing. So if there are pedestrians in the area, they'll actually end up waiting longer. Whereas where exit 8 is currently, there's an overlap, and we would do a coordinated phasing plan. So when they get the green coming off the exit, then they'll go to the signalized intersection with the connector, and they would have the green there as well.
So most of the people that get off 386 at that exit 8,
Mhm.
are they seeking to go toward Country Hills, or are they seeking to go toward Main Street?
I think there's a pretty good split. I don't have the volumes in front of me to review, but I think that there's a pretty decent distribution.
As one of those people who do that quite often, it depends what time of day. Evenings, it seems to be more toward Gallatin Road. Rest of the day, it seems to be more toward Country Hills.
Okay. Any questions on this alternative? Okay.
Okay. Alternative 2 was also a convenience option. This is so this would be on the east side of Winston Hills, and it was thought that there could be a shorter connector, which could potentially be a cost savings. And then again, there's the undeveloped land there for acquisition. Some of the concerns with this option are safety related with concentrating the conflict. So we would have exit 8, and then we'd have the connector, and then we'd pretty much fairly immediately have the other exit 8 and Avondale. And concentrating that, I think, would be problematic. Also, the intersection spacing is less favorable here for that reason. This would be close proximity to the embankment, so there'd be some concerns there, especially with clear sight distance. And then we would lose that signal timing efficiency again there. And the grades also are a little challenging here, especially if we were trying to go over and under with a short length for that connector. It'd be very difficult to have to meet the maximum grade requirements that we would need to meet for the roadway because the connector is so short. You don't have that length to make up the elevation difference.
Okay. I don't see any questions.
Okay. Alternative 3 was an emergency services access option, and this really wouldn't cost the city anything. This is the future construction of the east-west connector. which would provide that additional east-west connection for emergency services to be able to access the north side of Saundersville Road in the event of an emergency. This is a preliminary plan. We don't have construction documents in hand. It's not moving forward immediately, but it is a long-term solution to that problem.
Do we have any idea what the response time would be from, this is Station 7, isn't it?
I would assume, yes, sir.
Do we have any idea what the response time would be to this area from the station?
That I don't know.
Okay.
That I don't know.
Yeah, but this would prevent them from railroad track.
Hmm.
And how far along is this corridor?
Not very
No.
right now. This was a very preliminary plan for Baird Farms that we received last year. And then the pink that you see is through Forest Park, which is just in the very early stages of constructing phase 1.
And the developers are paying for the corridor, correct? As
That's
the
correct.
Part of the
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, that kind of takes care of the safety issue.
Yes, sir.
On that, okay.
Any other questions? Good. Okay.
You said you don't know the time frame on that in terms of, time for the emergency equipment to go through. Is that right?
I do not know the
Okay.
response time now. I'm sorry. I don't have that
Do you
answer.
think that maybe the chief knows?
It's probably something that he could approximate
Thank
much
you,
better than
Chairman.
I
I'm
would be
sorry.
able to.
I didn't mean to interrupt, Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so, does the staff know if, or the alderman in this area, that there have been, emergency situations where, the fire department has not been able to get to the location because of, the train running? Ms. Garten, you wanna come up?
I know that they have to go up 386 and kind of shoot back around when there is a train, and that adds like 3 to 4 minutes to their time, their response time. And a fire doubles every 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So if a train is there, they have to go a different route.
they have to go
Which
to
is
the next
longer.
exit and come around.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. Yes. Which is yeah, the station at Forest Retreat. Yeah. Yeah. Are those your alternatives?
I have others.
Oh, good.
This is another emergency access alternative would be to construct an additional fire hall with EMS services. It addresses that portion of it. Would be estimated with today's cost approximately $6.5 million, plus the cost of land. But it only addresses that one piece. So
I wouldn't consider that an alternative, not disrespect to the fire department.
Yeah.
yeah,
Especially with the corridor, the other option you just said,
right.
Station 7 can handle that.
I would think so. Oh.
Alderman Waters, did you have a question?
I just was going to ask the mayor or Jess, is this coming up the next BOMA meeting, or give me some idea when? It won't be this coming Tuesday, will it?
No, it won't. What we anticipate the next step of this is working with State Representative Lambert, working with the county budget committee, and seeing what they can contribute. And at the same time, still finishing up the acquisition and the engineering portion, which is the engineering portion is close to being complete.
So we're a few months away from BOMA, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
All right, that unfortunately wraps up the options that that we came up with. So I'm sharing the project location overview to kind of discuss why we weren't able to identify any other really viable alternatives. Part of it is the availability of undeveloped land. Um, if we constructed it elsewhere, it really would be negatively impacting multiple commercial properties that are developed and have active businesses. Um, and then if you look to the east of that location, that's our city limits. And you have the complication of the railroad there. I don't think it really solves that problem that we're experiencing with the cost. I think we would see the same issue there. And then we'd have the coordination with the county. On the west side, we would have a longer connector length. As you move to the west, the separation between 386 and Main Street becomes longer and longer. So the cost would continue to increase the further you moved away. So as far as location, we really are kind of tied down to that small area. So unfortunately, I was not able to come up with another viable alternative that would solve all of the priority problems that we're seeing. And that concludes that.
So, Mayor, I don't see Mr. Eckenroth here. I wanted to ask the staff a question, finance question. I don't know if you can answer or not. I guess my question, what would a $20 million note at 25 years, what would that do to the city budget? And
That table.
yeah, we know what the note
Oh.
would be, but what would someone mentioned we'd probably have to raise taxes. But so Mr. Eckenroth, would you come forward? I wanted some financial analysis done. If we went for the 25-year note, $20 million, what would that do to our city budget, annual budget?
I believe it was it 1.2 million? Is that what it showed on there?
I mean, last year our operating budget was in the red, $400,000. So I mean, I'm trying to understand the financial implications to the city.
Yeah, I think what we've seen is we've seen a couple good years with our budget. It's still challenging because costs are rising. We budget very conservatively, so what we typically see at mid-year budget is we'll estimate our revenues higher than we anticipated. So, if you're looking at, say, 3 years from now, if you're looking at a $65 million budget, 1.2 million, is 2% of that budget. So, it's something we could do. It's going to make our budget tighter. I don't think 1.2 million is out of the question to do, but it definitely, it puts an additional strain on the budget. We did drop off around $400,000 of debt this year that we won't have next year, and in another 2 years, I believe we roll off another couple $100,000 of debt. So, some of that could go to subsidize this, but we don't have, just a large amount of money sitting around, but it's, I don't know, call it 2% of an operating budget. So it's an option.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's out of the question.
So what about our debt limit? Did you do some analysis on what, does
Yeah.
the comptroller control what we can borrow?
We
or-
don't have a debt limit. So as long as we have revenue that we can secure the debt with, which we do, there's currently no debt limit that I'm aware of. Now our rating, so our bond rating will drop the higher our debt gets, right? We're not going to be rated as high, but we don't have a limit that I'm aware of.
And maybe Alderman Skidmore can answer this. Have we ever borrowed $20 million for any project in the city? A single project? So this would kind of set a record, wouldn't it?
Sure would. I'll just tell you what it is.
Yeah.
It's just, look, we've got well, I'm sorry. No, I'm not.
Thank you. This is a political question, really, that applies to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen about the debt. But we're a conservative community. It's that simple. And I'm as hard line as as conservative as they come, whether you like me or not. That's how I feel about it. This city, we're at a situation where we've got to figure out a lot of stuff. We really do. And I'm not going to belabor the point because we'll be here another hour. And I know dealing with the time, we'll have a lot of time to discuss this later. This is a conservative community. And I just don't see the Board of Aldermen, and it's a conservative board, at least I think it is. It's still too early to tell because we do have a lot of members that are on the board now, but of what I know, what my perception is, we're conservative, and there's just no way we're going to be able to spend that kind of money. It's just, even if you weren't conservative, that's stupid money. That's just not the way to do our taxpayers, the people that live here. Whether you're a moderate or politically speaking, a moderate, a liberal, or a conservative, we've got to learn the money that we've got in our back pocket. And sometimes what I have learned over the years is sometimes we get away from that, and that's what bites us. That's just like a snake. That's what gets us, man. And you can't do that. Now, when it comes to garbage, police protection, and things that are necessary, that are absolutely necessary for the city, I'm open to options. I really am. But this one, the money we're talking about now we're just not there yet. I mean, I hate to say it. And I think we really need to sit down and figure out. I mean, this has been a great discussion tonight. It really has, because it's been one that this board and these aldermen, we need to talk about. It's sort of like one of those that instead of putting our head in the sand, we need to really talk about it and see where we're going with it. But as far as that kind of money, it's not an option. It's just, I've thought about it. I've had 7 or 8 years to think about it for a long time. I've even been asked about it out in public and Kroger's, Walmart, just, walking in the neighborhood when I had my heart surgery and I had to get out and go out and walk the neighborhood because that's what I'm supposed to build this back up. I had people that literally, I'm serious and I'm not joking, I'm not making this up, that were walkers too, that I began to have friends with. It's kind of funny in a way, I have to chuckle. But they would even ask about it, and at that point in time I would say, I don't know, because we hadn't really talked about it. And they look at me and say, well, y'all need to talk about it because, I watch you all on TV and, that's a lot of money, Mark. And I drive down Gallatin Road every day. So I'm glad we're talking about it. I'm always open though, just because it's $20 million. I will say what my personal feeling is, but that's just my personal feeling. If you show me an option we've got, as I did 9 years ago, I did the same thing. I said, show me what you've got, and I have to make that decision. And unfortunately, I made the decision to go on. I would have lost anyway if I didn't, to go with it anyway, because I felt that side of town needs help. It does. And that's my job. And so y'all can continue to talk about it, but I really think we need to discuss it in the mayor's office of what our real serious plans are. Not something that it's pie in the sky, but what our real plans are. And if this isn't it, then we need to start looking somewhere else. My personal feeling is I appreciate you getting the options up there, but I don't think any of them are going to be beneficial. There may be one. The Forest View might is the one that I've thought about that may be the option, but the rest of the ones I'm not very comfortable with, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Alderman
Chairman.
Peterson.
Yeah, thank you. Sarah, you brought up the lack or limitations of undeveloped land. Is eminent domain and a viable option at this point to try to keep some costs down?
If that would result in a decrease in cost, it could be. Honestly, though, the further you get outside of this location, the separation is greater. So I don't think you would see a decrease in cost. I actually think it would result in a net increase. So I don't think there would be a benefit to it.
So, this sounds like we're over a barrel. Are these prices going to continue to increase?
Unless something changes with the market, then yes.
Do you think it would ever go back down to 5 million?
No.
Maybe
I think
in our
the-
dreams if we had, you know.
The
Yeah.
best we
I'm
could
sa-
hope
you
for
know,
would be
it's
16.
ridiculous to say 5 million sounds like a bargain, but
Yeah.
you know, in today's prices, it does.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I have, yes, Alderman Garza? Go to the mic, please. They're saying they can't hear you.
Thank you. I'm pretty new to this project, and when you come down Main Street from the Waffle House area and the Hertz paper, you could fly over the interstate to get on 386. It's a pretty simple move. Right across from the Dodger store, there's a flyover that takes you across. We can't do that over the railroad tracks. It's Saundersville.
Oh, so go over instead of under.
Damn
That's
right.
what you're saying.
Excuse me.
Sarah, did you
Yes.
look at that? Did you look at going over instead of under?
They did evaluate a bridge option, but the requirement for CSX, you have to be 23 feet from the top of rail to the bottom of the deck. And so to accomplish that would be more expensive than the tunnel. It was evaluated as an option.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to proceed. So I'm going to make a motion. I have told you that the mayor is working very hard with our state delegation to try to get additional state funding. To aid in his efforts, I would like to make a motion that we encourage the mayor to continue working with our state delegation, and that this committee sees the need for state participation. Mayor, would that help you to be able to say that, unanimously the Capital Projects Committee is asking for the state support?
I think it would be very helpful in seeking county support as well, if you could.
Okay, can you help with some language? We don't have a secretary, but it'll be on the record, I guess.
I think your words right there were perfect.
Okay.
Is that the Capital Projects Committee urges the mayor to continue to seek financial support from the state and the county on this project.
Yeah, and we see an important role for both the state and county to play in this important project. So I'll make that motion. I know it's something, I guess. Okay.
Sorry, I do it every time. Sorry, Jason. That maybe if we did a risk assessment with a scoring process on that intersection, it would get more attention to the state and to the county. I was just a thought.
Yeah.
So we sort of have something like that with the applications for grants.
Okay,
Because
okay.
it's not just the intersection we'll be creating, it's also where Avondale comes in, it's also where Winston Hills comes
Right,
in.
right.
So we do sort of have
Okay,
that already.
okay. But I'll second that motion then.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Thank you.
That's helpful, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I know we've done traffic studies there, haven't we?
Yes, multiple.
And those are part of our applications for all of these grants.
Yes.
I would urge to get that traffic study to the mayor so he can use that with the delegation as well.
Okay.
And when this legislation is proposed, we may need to contact our friends. I mean, I know all of our local delegation is in favor of this. So, okay,
Okay.
very good. Well, we did accomplish something, and we'll continue to look at it. And I know the Finance Committee will be taking this up in earnest before it comes to BOMA. Thank you.
So,
Ms. Locke.
with this also, we are kind of at a juncture with our consultant. We are in the right-of-way process, so we are close to staking and appraisals and all of those things. And so I do need very clear guidance and direction as to whether we are moving forward full speed ahead or whether we should pump the brakes for a moment and evaluate for funding options. Because once we start purchasing right-of-way, we are
Yeah,
expending those
spending money.
expenditures.
We're
Mhm,
spending
those
money.
expenditures. Mhm.
Thoughts? Put the,
But I think we should acknowledge that we've already been spending some money. So if this isn't,
True.
what Sarah's not asking you to do is say, let's stop the process. What she's asking you to do is just make sure that we go forward. So, I think that's, because we're already a long way through into this process.
and we've spent $900,000 so far, right? We've spent 900,000, at least 900,000.
Right.
Not counting staff time and other stuff, but
We're early in the right-of-way process. However, the engineering process is where that 900,000 comes from.
yeah.
So.
Okay, I'll give an opinion for a straw man. I think that we should hold off until we see how the legislation is going to go, to see if there's any more movement by the state, because I'm kind of with Alderman Skidmore. I haven't got my arms around this if it's 100% state fund, city funding. So I would propose that we hold off until we get more information on the possibility of state assistance. If the state could just do a 50%, then I think this project is very doable. If we could just get the state to agree to 50% of the project. Plus the county, I think, Mayor, has expressed some interest in this. So I think the mayor's working on a plan, but I personally don't want to spend any more money until we see the fruits of the mayor's efforts.
Thank you.
I'll agree with that.
Everybody
Yes.
shaking their heads? Okay, that's probably not what you wanted to hear, but I don't want to chase, this unless we got some help.
Sure. No,
Okay.
I just appreciate the direction. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right, moving on, Miss Locke.
All right. Country Hills Golf Cart Barn experienced some damage a little over a year ago now, I guess, from an ice storm. And we went through a process trying to get the insurance to cover it, and they would not. And then we had several contractors come out and review the building for repairs in an effort to try and prolong its life. And all of the contractors that we had visit the site declined to provide quote for repairs. Their opinion was that it needed to be demolished and rebuilt, or potentially if we had an engineering drawing, they would consider it at that point. So we went back to a structural engineer and asked them to provide drawings for spot repairs to maintain the integrity of the building and extend its service life. And the professional opinion from that assessment and the recommendations were that the building needed to be demolished and rebuilt expediently. And so we are moving forward with that process. We did just issue the notice to bid for the demolition on yesterday, the 18th, that was advertised. So the closing date for that is February the 2nd. We have advised the management company to keep staff outside of that building until we are able to rebuild a facility. So we are looking at temporary solutions for them as we move through demolition and rebuild of that structure.
Alderman
Yeah,
Dixon.
why does it say that the city budget, there's nothing in the city budget column?
Currently, there is nothing
Okay.
for that specifically. We are looking at that through the mid-year process.
Okay.
And then, we would find ways to fund it if need be, if
Got it.
we're, yes, ma'am. But
Not funded.
dedicated to that, we don't have funding.
Okay.
Yeah, when I read the letter from the structural engineer, my risk analysis just exploded. I could see if someone was injured after we had a structural engineer said, get out of the building,
Yeah.
it's dangerous. If we had an accident, this city would be sued. So,
Yeah.
and plus we have several $100,000 worth of equipment there. If the roof collapsed and destroyed that equipment, I'm afraid that the insurance company wouldn't pay for it because we went through an arbitration and they won. So they'd say, well, hey, you knew the building was, and you kept putting equipment in it. So this is another situation where I don't think we have an alternative. So that will be discussed in the finance committee Tuesday. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
correct? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
And the last, pickleball.
Pickleball.
And is Mr. Eckenroth gonna? This is some good news, I believe. I hope.
Yes, sir.
The ball is in your court. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so a few months ago, we were kind of working on locations for pickleball, and we'd come to the Capital Projects Committee, and we voted on Memorial Park as an appropriate place to kind of move forward with plans for pickleball. Well, since that time, there's been a parking lot that's been developed over at the Senior Center, and the mayor has reached out to Miss Julie White to see if they would be interested in having pickleball facilities adjacent to the Senior Center, so that the city could utilize the parking lot and not have to pay for a parking lot, which was included in the plan for pickleball at Memorial Park. So Ms. Julie White was in favor of having pickleball facilities over there. So it would be a way for the city to save some money. And then we could also utilize the area that we were discussing for Memorial Park, the pickleball area. We could use that for flag football or lacrosse. So by putting pickleball over there, we were taking away part of a field for football or lacrosse. So if we pull it over to an unused area at the Senior Center that already has a parking lot that's paid for, then the field can continue to be used by lacrosse and for flag football over at Memorial Park, and we could save money by having the facilities over at Senior Center where there's already a parking lot. And we've already had discussions with Ms. Julie White about how we could use the restrooms there at the Senior Center as well. So before we move forward, since we'd come to the Capital Projects Committee to get a recommendation on Memorial Park, we just wanted to come back to make sure if us choosing to go over to the Senior Center to save some money on this and continue to be able to utilize the field at Memorial Park, we just wanted to get a recommendation from the Capital Projects Committee since the original recommendation came from the Capital Projects Committee.
It's in Ward 1, isn't it? Or is it?
No, not anymore.
Okay.
Ward 2.
Ward 2, okay. Well, we're saving money.
Yes, sir.
And will this delay the project, the start of the project,
No, sir.
this move?
There's nothing in the radar right now that I'm aware of that would delay it.
Okay. And I know that there were some private groups that the mayor was meeting with, some pickleball interest groups. So are they in favor of this as well?
I believe they are.
Okay. So, any questions? Do we have a motion? Or Alderman Peterson, you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question. Jesse, did you say there's enough parking for the seniors using the center as well as those who are going to be using the pickleball courts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Miss White didn't have any concerns with pickleball folks coming. A lot of times they're early in the morning or later in the evening too. So the parking lot in the back is quite spacious, and they're adding. They're working on the parking lot in the front. So in this picture here, you can see the fresh blacktop in the back, and the front is being redone as well too. So there appears to be a lot more space certainly than is at Memorial Park, because Memorial Park is, at capacity as it is right now.
And will there be lights on the pickleball courts?
We have I think approximately 600,000 budgeted. So if we can I think moving here is going to reduce our costs. So we may have the option to go ahead and install lights with these courts over here.
And you mentioned that they can use the restrooms at the Senior Citizen Center. What are the hours of the center?
Well, if we were to utilize the restrooms there, we would have Parks have a key, or the PD have a key, and then keep that open during like the time that the tennis is open. So we would have hours for the restrooms that were different from the senior center hours, and then we would manage opening and closing the doors and making sure those bathrooms are clean.
Okay, thank you.
No further discussion. I want to thank Ms. Locke and the staff, Mr. Eckenroth, for their hard work. This was an excellent program tonight, and I learned a lot, so I want to thank you for that. Alderman Goodwin, do you have a motion to adjourn? All right, all right. We are adjourned.